All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It is 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Hey, y'all. That means it is time for what Black Pittsburgh needs to know. Um, if you've not joined us, this is a show that talks about public stuff and events and indications of all kind of stuff that impacts Black Pittsburgh. So it is also a show where we have conversations, and we really, really want you to dive into the chat and join the conversation. I am joined today by Dr. Jamil Bay. I have to drag that out. Dr. Bay is with the UrbanKind Institute and with Miracle Jones, who is with One Hood Media and the Director of Advocacy and Policy. We're dealing with a kind of a sticky subject today, one that can be a little frightening. That's being Black, a woman, pregnant in a pandemic in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania. There's a whole lot of negative indications in there for such an amazingly wonderful thing to be happening to two folks having a baby. We're going to get into that a little bit later. First, we're going to dive into our first 10 or 15 and talk about what's been going on in the last week since we came to you during a broadcast. Dr. Bay, what's happening in sunny Barbados?
Well, here it's nice. People are, the weather's nice. Folks are respecting the threat of a global pandemic. And, in respecting that, folks are behaving and following the rules and keeping it from spreading. From what I'm seeing in the news and from out, not just out of Pittsburgh, all over the United States, it's the opposite. Fortunately, there's a vaccine that's been approved. Another one's likely to be approved in the next couple of days. But that's still going to take some time to roll out and to convince everyone that this is something that they should trust, and that this process was trustworthy, and that folks should take the vaccine. And so that's where we are now. But when you see these numbers every day all over the place, new record deaths, new record infections, we're playing catch up because we didn't take it seriously from day one.
Yeah. Where we are. What are our numbers? I know you started with the Black COVID group. What's going on with us? And I want to get into a little bit of conversation on where are we standing on using the vaccine. There's still a lot of folks that are like, sure, I don't know if I'm gonna do this.
I mean, and so I think I'm hopeful that in the next couple of weeks that the seriousness of what's happening. I mean, when these death numbers piling up the way that they are, not just in Allegheny County, but in Pennsylvania, in the United States, the way that these death numbers are piling up, I'm hoping that folks start to see that this is more serious than we've been treating it to this point, and we can start to think about what it means with a new administration and a new tone about the communication around this thing.
Right.
I think there were some unfortunate choices, Trump's mentality around, warp speed, making, it didn't set up something that we should be. I don't want any warp speeded science
right.
that I'm, injecting into, folks. That doesn't, the mixed metaphor.
Good. We got that to play into, because I was like, okay, I'll take the whatever happens, when the vaccine comes out, I'll take it. But then you're right. He's in the background of my head. It's like, we're gonna get this done by Thanksgiving. We're gonna do, and you're like, we're gonna pass it through. And so all that hype, even if it's completely 100% good, I got him in the back of my head screaming this.
Right. It's not real. It's fake news. They're trying to hurt me. Warp speed. That whole thing didn't work. But the idea is a lot of the science is a lot better in how to understand how to do a vaccine.
Good.
There were a lot more resources put into it. And at that scale, they were able to take steps that would have taken much longer with fewer resources contributed. And so rather than communicate that, this imagery of a warp speed process, where you start to think that folks are skipping steps. And then you couple that with some of these players who are developing the vaccine, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, they've been known to violate public trust. They've been known to skip steps and not communicate, science.
What?
And so you combine all of these things, it's a recipe for confusion.
Trump's arms around the Pfizer president was enough to make my blood run cold. Miracle, what you gonna do when the vaccine comes out? You gonna
see what happened was like. I think for me, no, and I will say a couple of things. One, I am one of those people who have allergies. I've had chemical poisoning from medication before, so I am not in the eligible class to take the vaccine. The CDC and others have recommended that if you have allergies, if you have some pre-existing conditions and known medical intervention issues with medical interventions, you should take the vaccine. So now I'm not going to take it. I don't believe, and this is no disrespect to any other doctors who've been out in the community, I do not believe there has been enough of a reconciliation between Black folks and the medical community to go out and just trust this vaccine. I still think it's a little bit in the experimental phase, right? And I don't think they've been as transparent as possible. And granted, this has been one of the most transparent vaccine processes in a long time.
Yeah.
But I don't think they've been as transparent. And I know they were saying, with COVID-19, you can look at COVID-18 and prior, and to see how some of this virus impacts your system. And that's how they're able to roll out this vaccine so quickly, because they've already been researching the COVID-19 strains. But for me, no, I think that when Trump said we did this 5 years early, I heard maybe wait 5 years. That's what I heard. I was like, okay. But still, I think people understand it's a vaccine. Nothing is 100%. But if you want to be out here partying, traveling, if you have to work, I think that, take the vaccine, the risks are going to probably be the same,
So I may take one for the team. I don't know. I think I'm going to wait and see if everybody explodes, after a couple months. See what happens. I will more than likely do it. But, I think we're all in different places. Dr. Bay, I don't know about you, but I think we just are representative of our community. All of us are slightly scared with how quick this went down. We also know that without, a lot of us taking the vaccine, and if it's actually works and does what they say it's going to do, then we can slow this thing down pretty tremendously. And so, we're all having to make that decision. And we are not by any means suggesting either way for, our listeners what to do. We're just talking about what we may do and based on the knowledge that we have. So, more than likely I'm going to do it. But I am probably going to sit back for a minute, and I don't know what that means. I'm going to listen really carefully. They've already started, and looks like they're starting with our frontline. They're starting with our medical professionals and all of that. And I think we'll probably know sooner than later. What happens. I'm trying to be responsible, but
Miracle brings up a good point. And this is a part of a lot of the folks who I'm talking to at the health centers and folks who are working at the Vaccine Crisis Commission on the state. It's up to the medical community, public health, to restore and establish trust and be transparent about what are you doing to establish trust. If I am the kid that's being punched in his head by the other second graders and pushed around, and then you come and you tell me, no, what are you doing to build trust with those kids? The kids that are beating up on me, no, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we are. But, and this is not a but, this is and.
Right.
And we're in the middle of a global pandemic that is dangerous, and our folks are much more vulnerable to the most severe outcomes of this.
So
and we need to think about that
than anybody, because we're dying at faster rates. So it is
right.
a heck of a dilemma. I want to bring somebody in right now. She's going to be a part of the conversation we're having on being Black and pregnant in Pittsburgh, but she's also doing contact tracing over at Alma, Illery, and that's India Hunter. Can y'all bring her into the convo? Hey, India.
Hello. How are you?
Good to have you. So you're wearing hats for us today. You're doing some contact tracing, and you are also going to be training to be a doula. But in terms of the contact tracing, can you tell people a little bit about how that's working and about your work?
Sure. So just for clarification, I work for PCHS, which is Primary Care Health Services. So I'm technically working, Alma Illery is our corporate office, and pretty much everything goes through Alma Illery, but we do have the 9 different sites throughout the county, which is really nice. We have the site in Homewood, which is Alma Illery. We also have our Braddock and East End site. We have our health center and our dental office on the West End, Hazelwood, McKeesport. So we're spread out throughout the entire county.
Which we are glad about.
Yeah, which is also really helpful in this conversation too, about how we're going to mitigate the issues with COVID in our community. And so something that is already in place at PCHS is the multiple services that we offer. So not only do we offer healthcare, but we also offer dental, we offer behavioral health, social services, pretty all encompassing. And so my role now that COVID is a thing, and as we've talked about, when America gets a cold, the Black community gets a flu. We all have heard that before. And so, so we know that our community is impacted greatly by this. We are more likely to contract it. We are more likely to be susceptible for it because of our workplaces and other social determinants of health. There's so many aspects of it, and we're more likely to die from it if we do contract it. And so a lot of our work that's being done now with contact tracing is working in conjunction with the Allegheny County Health Department and doing contact tracing daily. And that's 7 days a week. There's multiple contact tracing teams, but my specific team that I am in charge of and a part of is the Federally Qualified Health Center program, which is a program with the Allegheny County Health Department. And so not only is PCHS a part of it, but several other federally qualified health centers within Allegheny County have since hired contact tracers to work within their own federally qualified health centers. Right now, because we're in a surge, most of us are doing contact tracing full time, but the contract is actually contact tracing and community health work. And so
ultimately, as people are listening who may not be familiar with this, somebody gets an exposure. You say, where you been? Who have you talked to? Who you've been exposed to try to track and make sure someone else has not gotten sick. So
yeah, that's like the general idea of it. We actually, here in Allegheny County, we have a couple different steps. So there's the, it comes from the state. All positive cases go straight to the state. So the state is keeping up with all of the cases. They then assign it based on county. Once it gets to the county, our case investigation team follows up with those who are positive. And in those conversations with these people who are positive, a lot of them are talking about their symptoms. They're talking about medical guidance with them. And then they're also giving us information, asking while we're asking for who they've been in contact with. So the contact tracers, we're actually the ones who are going, that last step is calling those people who were in contact with them and saying, hey, you have been in contact with someone who has COVID-19.
You're bringing great news every day. That's your job.
Yeah. Luckily, most people have been very cooperative, and most people who have contracted it are being responsible and telling people that they've been in contact with. So most people that we do talk to on a day-to-day basis know that we're going to give them a call. We do have a few people every so often who are like, I have no idea what this is about. And people are skeptical, because there is a lot of misinformation out there. You get spam calls every day. So sometimes people are like, how can I verify this information? So, but for the most part, most of our respondents are very cooperative. And
using the app, because I know I'm trying to pull this app over, but I know I'm using this app now that tells me when I've been close to somebody who's had it. Yeah. Is that, are you guys recommending that?
What was that?
Are you guys recommending that? Does that help at all in tracing?
Yeah, it's very helpful, especially when people can self-report their symptoms. So we are recommending that. But here in Allegheny County, once we talk to someone who has been exposed, we actually sign them up for a county alert. So our alert is called Sarah Alert, which is different. The app that you have is on a state level, which is really helpful, but it's also helpful for us on a localized level to do things so we can track it before it even has to go through the state. Because What was that?
The local app is called what?
Oh, so it's not an app. The way it works is the people we talk to who we're contact tracing for, we ask if they want to enroll in it when we talk to them on the phone.
Okay, I got you. All right. All right.
Yeah, everybody has that app on their phone, I think, though. Even though it's on a state level, it's really helpful to track symptoms. It also, if you turn your location services on, it can tell you if you're in close contact with someone who's been tested positive. It's really helpful.
Yeah, very helpful.
Yeah.
What were you thinking over there?
Yeah, and it's just, you talk about scams. Y'all do not ask for financial information. You're not asking for people's personal information. Correct.
Right. And there's a lot of scams where people have been telling us that they got a call from someone and they ask them very similar questions about contact tracing, which scares me as a contact tracer, because I'm like, if I just get a call and they're just asking like, oh, who have you been in contact with and what are your symptoms? But then at the end of the call, they're like, oh, we want to send you a test kit. We need your credit card information. That's an automatic sign. We do not ask for any financial information. We don't ask for social security numbers, any of that. So
that will suck. I mean, they were really trying to find a way to take rid of the dang honest things. That is nuts. So
yeah,
you a bogus test kit and get your credit information at the end.
And it makes it harder for us as the health department to do our job correctly, because it's hard to get people to think that we're not a scam at that point. So
right. So I want to bring in our other guest. So, because I know some of those calls that you've made have been, a pregnant woman at the other end of that call who said you're having to tell that she's had some exposure. So I want to bring in Iyanna. Where's Iyanna Bridges? I want to bring her in and Cali Johnson. So we have a doula. You're going to explain a little bit about what that is and a little bit about the birthing hut, Iyanna, and we have Miss Cali Johnson, who is going to be a mommy in how many months? When do you do, Cali?
May 4th. So I'm due May 4th. So about five months.
All right.
5 months.
So we talked the other day, about how you're doing and some of your concerns about being pregnant in the time of COVID and what that's like. And so we ask all of you guys to just kind of join this conversation. Iyanna, what are your biggest concerns now that you are working with, young pregnant women, and, what's changed about your role as a doula? First, tell people what a doula is, and then tell us a little bit about how your role has changed since COVID.
Okay, so a birth doula is an individual that provides emotional, physical, and mental support to the expectant mother as well as her family. We also provide resources and education so that we can help with preparation for labor and delivery, as well as early child development education. My role as a doula has changed drastically since experiencing COVID, due to the fact when we first started dealing with COVID and trying to understand exactly how exposure and contacting the virus can affect mommy and baby. Mm-hmm. A lot of doulas and birth professionals were automatically locked out of hospitals. Yeah. So we weren't allowed to be that support person for mommy as well as her partner or any other expectant person that she was able to be with. Mommies also were restricted with whom they can bring into the room with them. At first, the hospitals brought it down to one support person. Then some states decided that mommy needs to deliver by herself, and that's never a good situation. Also moving to the fact that a lot of moms had to change what their birth plan was, and because they didn't feel safe with giving birth at hospitals, so now they started to make decisions based out of fear and start having births at home. So there are a lot of different aspects that came into the whole birth process. Mm-hmm. We started experiencing COVID and trying to help parents understand how to maneuver around the situation.
Scary stuff. I mean, statistically, Black women in Pittsburgh, and I hate having this conversation, Kelly, with you on the phone, but I mean on the line. But statistically, 90 out of 97 cities, the death rates for Black women during pregnancy are very high here, and fetal deaths are you're twice as likely
Seen the
to have a
numbers.
baby, right? So that's a scary time to be carrying.
I've seen the
What you
numbers.
saying
It's
now?
scary.
Yeah, it's frightening to you right now, knowing that.
I've seen numbers for years, and I'm just honestly walking by faith, because at this point, that's all I really can do. I've switched doctors 3 times in this process, and I've only been pregnant for about 20 weeks. So you can imagine, like me, I was at an OB, and they just told me that my husband can't come. I was like, well, he's the only support that I have, and he's the biggest support that I need. If he can't show up to anything, then I'm going somewhere that I can. At this point, everyone's like, well, where are you going to give birth? On my bathroom floor.
Wow. So what was she
At this
there with
point,
you
on the
earlier?
bathroom floor.
Right. That the first doctor wouldn't let you bring your husband. You said the second time you went to a doctor that they weren't being very respectful to you guys as a couple. And you're in as your third doctor now. And they're saying it's a possibility now that you also can bring him.
After getting off the phone shoot, the next day I'm getting on Facebook, and all they say is, you can't bring your spouse. I call them, and they're like, oh yeah, we changed the policy on the 1st. Well, my appointment was on the 10th, so there could have been some type of communication. I could have, made an adjustment. And they're like, well, that's the way the policy is. If you don't like it, cancel your appointment. Cancel my appointment.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what's been going on
Find a new doctor.
Policies
I'm still looking for a new doctor.
Ever changing, especially when they get new information in regards to COVID, and especially being that we are experiencing such a drastic hike with mortality due to COVID. Hospitals now are running around and they are switching up policies. A lot of providers aren't even aware of the switch that's being done within the system. So they'll tell you as an individual, yeah, you're more than welcome to bring your one support person. And then you show up and the hospital's like, oh, no, the doctor provided you with the wrong information. Which is why I always tell mommies, when you are expecting, every appointment, you need to make sure you know what the updated policy is going to be. Get everything in writing, and do not only rely on your provider to provide you that information. You need to also check with the hospital that you're going to be delivering at, or the birth center that you're going to be delivering at, what their current policy is in regards to the labor and delivery unit.
I mean, yeah, it's been, I would say this whole pandemic, I've been a medical support for my family for various issues. And I got to one of the doctor's office. They're like, you have to come in. And they said, oh, well, go wait out in the car. We just need to verify that you were here. So go wait out in the car and we'll call you within the next few hours. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? And so that's why I talk about that level of communication isn't there. I've been talking with other pregnant people, and they're like, this is a scary time, right? It's a pandemic, but also you're giving birth to another human. Right? Some people for like the first time, and there is no communication. And on the other hand, when I talk to medical providers, they're stressed, they're exhausted, and they're like, we can't tell another person, that they have to do this by themselves, because like we're just exhausted and exasperated. And so as Black people, I think we're getting again the tail end of histories of disrespect, but then we're getting all of this exhaustion, all of this hate, and we're like, but we're still trying to survive this pandemic as well.
And do normal things like having babies. India, are you hearing anything about and I'm not putting you on the spot, and I'm not saying that you're a doctor, but is there any conversation about the safety of the vaccine with pregnant women?
There is not a lot of talk around that right now. Right now, what they're doing, they are recommending pregnant women not get the vaccine, but not sure. They haven't done a lot of, as we all know, there's still a lot of information that we need to learn about the vaccine. In regards to pregnant women, they're pretty much treating pregnant women the same as like the Miracle was saying, like people who have certain allergies or people who have comorbidities and pre-existing conditions that may be exacerbated by vaccines, pretty much treating it the same way. I think within the next couple of months, as we learn more about it, there may be different guidelines, but even before we talked about the vaccine, there's just not a lot of research or data available for pregnancy and COVID right now. So the only, like, you can do any type of search engine. You can go on PubMed, you can go on all these different places, and there's really not that much information. The only thing that's like very definite is that they know for sure that COVID can't be passed through breast milk. And they know that there's very little data that shows it, but it doesn't seem like it can be passed during birth if the mother does have it. But there's a whole bunch of research that still needs to be done. And especially for Black women, not just pregnant women. Pregnancy is a whole nother thing that's already not a lot of information on.
Right.
It's those specialties that a lot of people kind of overlook when they think about like public health. And so you talk about pregnancy already being one of those things where it may be some disparities lying, but then you also, when we talk about intersectionality, you tack on Black women and the disparities that we see during pregnancy. And so there's a lot that still needs to be learned about it. There's not a lot of data or information available, but I just, my personal suggestion as a public health professional is just to do your research. That's for everyone, but especially for pregnant women, not only you doing the research, but your support systems around you doing the research, and making sure that when you do take that next step, consult the right professionals. There's so much misinformation out here. So going straight to professionals and asking about their professional opinion, and also just remaining autonomous in your decisions. I think especially in pregnancy, that's something hard to do for mothers.
Yeah.
Remain autonomous. It's hard to know. It's a scary time already, and you just want the best for yourself and your baby. So you're going to do whatever the doctor says, but there's also that level. If you're not comfortable with something, you should be able to speak on it. And that's why doulas are so important. That's why having that one support person is so important. And it's really hard now because most hospitals have like the one support person and then the doula. Sometimes the hospitals don't even allow the doula in the room. It has to be like virtual. There's a lot that's happening right now. That's just, it's not okay. It's like, it's hard as a public health professional because you're like, we want to make sure everybody's safe. But we also know that there's like levels to it. And knowing that there's so many disparities in childbirth already for Black women, it's hard to look at a mom and tell her like, no, you can't have your mom there. You can't have all these.
You can't have your doula there. You were saying that there are times that you've been, with a young woman and you're going through all this and you're her coach, and all of a sudden you're being told you can't come in.
Exactly.
So how has your practice changed?
At the beginning of the pandemic, and I know there were a lot of states, as Iyanna was saying, a lot of states were saying like they couldn't have any support person. And it really was the birth workers on the ground who organized to make sure that a lot of these states reversed that decision, because they were like, this is ridiculous. Women need support during labor. They are literally giving birth. There's no reason why at least one person can't be in the room. So I think that's also why it's important to advocate and really maintain that sense of autonomy. And I think that's one thing that's usually missing in the conversation. A lot of times we talk about this and we pathologize pregnant women and we forget to have them in the conversation. So I think it's great that Callie's on the call, because I'm like, we have somebody who's pregnant who's going through it, and she can.
And some of the some of the problems, some of the bumps in the road she's already experienced. Dr. Bay, I mean, is this a conversation in the Black COVID working group that's even been broached?
Well, as India was saying, the children and pregnant mothers were not included in any of the trials. And so that's a population that said there's no information on how it's going to impact you. And so it's wise to let's err on the side of caution and not use the vaccine. But this conversation about doulas, I mean, the medical profession and the birthing centers and hospitals, they've been hostile toward the doula relationship. This is not a new thing. I mean, this has been a convenient block for a lot of folks who don't respect what doulas do. And I think it's a part of just the arrogance of the medical profession and so many doctors to just think that so much of your health is connected to your feeling and your emotions and your support, your stress levels. And I've never given birth. I was in the room when my wife, my son was born, but that was not an easy thing. I mean, but she needed a few more cheerleaders in the room. And so I can't imagine like just the overlooking right now. It's just about my outcome as the delivery doctor is this baby. You deal with your own mental health and whatever comes later, that's on somebody else's watch. And I think that attitude, that sort of hyper specialty, where it's not about how are we going to be sure that this family thrives, that this mother and child thrives? What's the long-term success? That doctor who's in the room right now, that's not a part of their equation. And I think we need to rethink, like, what are we doing here?
And that's the issue.
What kind of support do you
providers
need?
are approaching
That's
birth
not
from a
what we're talking
physiological
about.
standpoint, but not assessing the mother and her pregnancy from a holistic standpoint. When it comes to giving birth, you need a village around you. That's not just for once baby is already here. Going through the whole process, you need support from a doula, your partner, your mother, the provider. A doula works great with a midwife and an OB as long as they're willing to respect the stance that a doula has. A doula does not come into a room with mommy and is automatically in defense, whereas we come and we make sure that we are providing the best information for mommy. We are there to make sure that she is taken care of from a standpoint in which a provider doesn't necessarily have the time to concentrate on mommy. As a provider, you're doing rotations. As nurses in labor and delivery, you're doing rotations. You're not sticking to that one pregnant woman. Whereas a doula, when I come into a hospital and I'm coming to assist Cali, she's the only person that I'm worried about. And from the time I step in there, when she calls me, it's like, okay, I think it's time. Or if I come and I assist her and I bring her to the hospital, I'm there until baby is delivered, maybe 2 hours after, because I need to make sure she get her golden hour and make sure breastfeeding goes well, if that's her option. But I also look at you from a postpartum perspective to make sure that physiologically everything is back where it needs to be. Your uterus is also going back in place. And emotionally, you are okay with where you're at. But with so much that's going on right now, a lot of mothers are making decisions based off of fear. And that is not a good thing, especially in a Black community, because we have so much misinformation. We have so much miscommunication. We have so much distrust with the medical institutions that mothers don't even feel like they can have these conversations with their providers. And now they're having unassisted births at home. Pittsburgh lacks Black midwives who are doing home births. We only have one Black midwife, and she's at the midwife center, the birthing center.
Wow, just one?
Just one. Oh. So when you're making these decisions to have home births, now you have to take into account that your midwife that might be delivering your baby is not going to be Black, but that's what you want. So now you have to get a white midwife and see if she has maybe a Black student midwife or a Black assistant. And even then, you have to make sure that this white midwife is where you are when it comes to what your goals are for your baby and how you intend on delivering. If y'all aren't on the same page, then you're in the same situation you was in when you was interviewing providers in the hospital institutions.
Yeah.
And then you go and you're like, you know what? I'm not dealing with this. I'm just going to have a baby on the bathroom floor, which is not advised.
It can happen, but that's not it's miracle.
You don't want to do that if you don't prepare yourself to do that. Preparation is everything. Now, if you are preparing from day one to have a home birth, by all means, go ahead and do it. My fourth one was a home birth, but don't do it out of fear. Nothing positive comes from decisions you make out of fear. Why? Because you're not thinking logically. You aren't prepared. You don't have a backup plan.
Right.
If you have birth at home by yourself unassisted, how long is it going to take the ambulance to get to you in case something goes wrong? Especially with COVID going on now, ambulances are not coming the way they should be. They are delayed. And we all know ambulances don't get to Black communities on time anyway, prior to COVID. So you need to make sure you have all of these things crossed off of your list and you have somebody to be there with you.
Yeah. Yeah, Miracle, what were you wanting to add to this?
I was going to say, I guess to give a little bit of a trigger warning, but one of the reasons why we're having this conversation is in the U.S., Black women are 3 times more likely to have maternal death than their white counterparts. Here in Pittsburgh, fetal deaths for Black children are 2 times more likely to occur. And in some of our neighborhoods, we didn't bring the slide up. It's up to like 6 times, right? Death. And maternal mortality isn't just during labor and delivery. It is the first 2 years after birth has happened because there are complications, things change, like Iyanna was saying, mentally, emotionally, physically with the child. And Harvard and some other people actually we're talking about that the rate has actually increased in the
Yes,
past
it's
2
now
years,
4
right?
times more likely, and it's still climbing.
As a result of COVID, it's increasing.
No, it's not a result of COVID. It's a result
But
of
it's just a period. Okay.
systematic institution.
It's a lot of like medical racism wrapped up in that as well, because not only during it's a lot to unpack, especially when you talk about it, and it's hard as a professional, a birthing professional, because we want to have these conversations, but we also don't want to add stress to the mothers. I feel like a lot of times nowadays, especially because this is becoming a hot topic, we have legislation that's being put in place to help combat this issue. We have big names, big celebrities speaking up in this situation. We saw Serena talk about it. We saw Beyonce talk about it. So a lot of people are really starting to shed light on this issue, but in the same, it's great that we're like having this conversation. It's great that we're being attentive to it, but it is also very hard to have a conversation where you don't want to scare the moms and you don't want to add that stress to the moms.
I want to stop right there. Stop right there for just a second, because Callie, you are hearing all of this. You know, you're absorbing all of these stories, the statistics. I mean, if you were to talk to a doula, I mean, what kind of questions would you have for Iyanna? I mean, she's not giving medical advice on, and but what kind of things that you want to know about?
Is it my big question? Is it normal for me to be anxious and for me to be scared or for me to be questioning everything?
Oh, definitely. Prior to COVID, anxiety comes hand in hand with pregnancy, especially if this is your first one, because you don't know what to expect. And I don't really like the whole slogan, trust your body, because if you never experienced it before, you don't know what to trust. You don't know what's going on. You have nothing to compare this to. So anxiety is definitely there. I was anxious with all of my children because it's so many what ifs. Now, COVID on top of the what ifs already is just a recipe for disaster if you don't have nobody to bring you down, provide you with evidence-based information and resources, and have somebody to provide you with that support that you need. A lot of times, the only thing you need to do is just talk to somebody and get those issues that you have off of your chest. As long as you keep them in and they keep weighing on your chest, they're going to continue to build up. I remember with my first child, I used to have dreams that I was going to forget her at the mall or forget her in the car or, crazy things like that.
I have those dreams.
Now we have moms who are like, what if I contact COVID while I'm giving birth in a hospital? What if they separate me and my child during delivery because they need to test baby for COVID? What if I do have COVID going into the hospital and they automatically opt me to get a C-section? So this is a different type of anxiety. And this is the reason why you need doulas with you, especially at this point, to not only bring mommy relief, but to also bring your partner relief. Imagine how your husband is feeling. He's helpless in this situation. And the last thing we need is for a Black man to start asking questions in a hospital and automatically he has to leave now. So now you're still by yourself because he didn't know how to handle the situation. He sees you in pain, and the only thing he wants to do is comfort you, and he's not able to do so because he doesn't have the techniques of bringing you comfort. He doesn't have the information to provide you to make sure that you know that you are okay. So it's a whole thing, and I definitely make sure you reach out and get somebody to assist you, which is why I applaud Healthy Start, because birthing mothers need access to birthing professionals. Doulas and midwives are not somebody you can come by that's like, sure, I'll go ahead and do it for free. Definitely respect our profession. We do deserve compensation for it, but it needs to be something that is accessible to everybody in the community. So
you suggested Healthy Start as a place to reach out to get you connected to a birthing professional?
Definitely. They provide free doulas for birthing people. And we provide in-person birth, and we also provide virtual birth, depending on the situation of COVID and how hospitals comply with our with doulas and allowing us in. But virtual birth assistance is just as important as in-person assistance. A lot of people see virtual and they're like, okay, I don't want that. I want somebody to be with me. But if you don't sign up for virtual support, ahead of time and you get to a hospital and like, we don't have nobody to help you, now you are just, messed up out of having somebody to support you there.
Wow.
Being virtual doesn't mean I can't assist you, it just means I can't touch you. But I can still speak with you. I can still provide soothing information. I can still provide you with comforting information. I can still direct your partner to how he can bring you physical comfort, although I'm not able to do it myself. I can also provide you with preparation coming up to labor and delivery. We are not only there for while you are in active labor. We are with you prior to. We have labor and delivery courses that you and your partner both take to make sure that you understand what your body is going through, to understand exactly how your hormones are going to be changing, to understand how you track those contractions, to know when it's time to go. And we help you labor at home as long as possible before you go to the hospital. So you're not in a hospital in triage for a whole day because as soon as your water broke, you ran to the hospital and you were only 2 centimeters. So these are things that we are here to provide you with comfort and emotional ease.
Yeah. I just want to add what Iyanna was saying, because I absolutely echo everything that she just said, like 100%. Healthy Start especially is such a great resource. And I think it's really important because Healthy Start is that hub. They're a hub and they can tell you all types of things. There's so many things that providers don't tell patients during their perinatal period. There's so many women that you'll talk to, they don't even know what a doula is. They've never heard the term until they're like ready to deliver the next week. And then they're like, oh, can I have one of these people? And it's like, it's supposed to be more full spectrum, And so I think also, just to answer Callie's original question about anxiousness, I used to intern at the Midwife Center and we had our behavioral health services there. And it's one of the reasons we have behavioral health services at the Midwife Center is because it is known that women are anxious during pregnancy and during postpartum. It's something that is super important to pay attention to, is that anxiousness. And especially if you have a history of anxiety and depression yourself. And even though a lot of us in the Black community haven't been formally diagnosed, we know what depression is. We know what anxiety is. So we know. And if you're always an anxious person, like I don't have kids now, but I know as soon as I start in the process of like forming my family, I'm such an anxious person now. I'm like the whole
pregnancy takes it to a whole other level.
Pregnancy takes it to a whole nother level. And if you have that history of anxiety and depression, you're more likely to have it during your pregnancy. You're more likely to develop postpartum depression and anxiety after the fact. So this is something that is normal, but it is one of those things that if you already know yourself and you know that you're an anxious person or you have mental health needs, it is important to get connected to those resources. And Healthy Start is one of those resources that can help you identify therapists there are prenatal therapists out here. There's a couple in Pittsburgh. I interned under one of them, but there's a bunch out there. They can get you connected to the therapist. They can get you connected to doula services, and doulas also provide that mental health support as well. A lot of the conversations that are had is easing that anxiety and letting them know, like, these are the facts. This is what we have. This is the information. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to become a doula, and I'm excited to start the process of doing it. But I think that was something that is really important to note, that like it's normal to be anxious, but it's also one of those things where you have to know yourself and seek out the help.
But there are here to help. Right. Exactly. Miracle.
Yeah, I was wanting to follow up and say, what are some of the questions that pregnant people should be asking? One of the things that when this first started happening, I started seeing the stories about how like with the people would go in and they would say, you have COVID, it's very bad case, we're going to induce you into a coma. And then people were like waking up and they were just like, here's
your baby.
Like, here's your baby. Like, so what are some of the questions that people need to be asking their medical providers about the COVID protocols, about the C-sections, about, what they're going to do if worst case scenario happens?
That's a good question. And that's exactly what birthing people should be asking their providers. What is your protocol if I do test positive for COVID? What is your protocol if my partner tests positive for COVID? What are my options? You have options when giving birth. There is never a one route to delivering a baby unless it is a life or death situation for mommy and baby, and then we automatically have to get baby out. Other than that, you have options. There are ways to go about it. They can allow you to free birth. There are different ways for you to have a cesarean. You can have a gentle cesarean. They can put you all the way to sleep, which is more than likely an emergency cesarean. They don't do that too often to fully sedate you. But you can also have your doula in a room if you have a cesarean. Some hospitals are allowing doulas in a room. So you want to make sure you know where your provider stands. Same thing when it comes to midwives. A lot of midwives are a whole lot more flexible than OBs are. So you might want to try to deal with a midwife at first because they're a whole lot easier to communicate with, because they look at birth from a different standpoint. They are alongside with the doula philosophy as far as a holistic care for mommy and baby and partner in a family oriented process, as opposed to get you in, get you out, cut you open, baby's hair.
We're putting the links. I want to slow down for just a second. We're putting the links in the chat. Devin Talaferro, thank you so much, at the Midwife Center. She's put a lot of links there for Healthy Start. That link is out there, and a few articles about giving birth during a pandemic. So we want to make sure that those resources are available. I also want to keep checking in with you, Cali, and you're getting a lot of information given to you. Would you have ever considered using a doula? Did you know about doulas? Yeah.
I actually am. It's funny because I'm glad I got to meet you, Iyanna, because I'm actually in one of your Facebook groups. I searched you about a month ago and found your Facebook group, and I'm just.
Oh, no. Yeah, when she gets back in, we're gonna let her finish her. She's got a tough connection. She's calling in from work. She's also a frontline person because she's a hairstylist. So I'm curious about that feedback when she comes back in. Those risks.
Miracle was asking though about the questions to ask. Again, I echo Iyanna. She's just you right on point, girl. But I also think that a good question to ask is how often are these policies updated? And that was kind of like the conversation we had earlier about how she had this appointment on the 10th, and then they updated the policy on the 1st, and nobody told her. So I think a good question to ask is how often is this policy updated? How often do they move it down the channels to the actual providers? What does that process look like? I think that's also a good question to ask.
We're gonna hang in there with you, Cali. You're having some connection problems. We're holding the place for you. Can you hear us?
I don't know why it's not working for me. It don't love me today. It doesn't usually do this. Yeah, I can hear you now. It's just I don't know why my phone doesn't love me today. But I have a couple questions. I've actually done a lot of research on the internet, which has kind of had me thrown for a loop, because a lot of the research that I'm getting, they're telling me it's based off of one statistic, and it's not based off of what I'm looking for in general. And with my medical history, this is my first pregnancy, but this isn't my first pregnancy. I had an ectopic pregnancy in 2017. So when I let them know, I'm not going to go through this process by myself, because they made me go through my whole surgery by myself. My husband wasn't even there before they even rushed me into surgery. They just said, the baby's ectopic, you got to go into surgery now. And that was just it. There was no second opinion. It was get done or you're going to die.
Wow.
And that was the scariest moment in my life. So now I don't go to any appointments by myself at all. So you can't force me to doing something by myself. And the last time I did something by myself, I went into surgery. So I'm always very skeptical of what they say to me, because I feel like a lot of the doctors are just like, I mean, that's just it. Take it or leave it. My last appointment, she said you gained 13 pounds. And she was like, I mean, it's healthy, but I wouldn't gain any more, because that's just my opinion.
Ouch.
Excuse me?
Definitely, man.
Wow.
That's me like that.
Exactly what we were talking about, because when I was talking to Iyanna, we were talking about these traumatic births, because I had a crazy 3-day disaster with my first child. And I was scared to death when I went back to do it again. And so, Iyanna, you were saying one of the reasons you went into being a doula was because of a traumatic birth, that it kind of drove you into this, knowing how much pregnant women need.
Yes, and that was with my fourth. It honestly wasn't a traumatic birth experience. It was a traumatic pregnancy experience. Like, I knew I wanted to have a midwife, so I seeked out a midwife, and I was told I was too fat to give birth naturally. My BMI was too much. Mind you, they didn't have any of my other history. I've had 3 natural births prior to my fourth. So I know I can deliver, but I just didn't want to do so in a hospital. But I was automatically rejected. Then I go to another midwife and she's like, well, you know, your anemia is really low, which I've been anemic since I was a child, but I always get it under control, especially through pregnancy. And she just didn't trust that my blood levels would maintain enough for if I were to lose a lot of blood during birth, that it would be safe. So I was automatically rejected again. Then I went to another provider and he just automatically said, okay, so you're overweight, you're anemic, we're automatically going to consider you high risk, and we're going to automatically schedule you for a C-section. Didn't speak to me, didn't want to know what my wishes were, my desires, didn't develop a birth plan with me at all. I was not a part of any of these conversations and decisions made. So I was like, you know what? I need to take matters into my own hand, because if I'm going through this much trauma throughout my pregnancy, I'm depressed. I'm not going to allow you to make my birth traumatic. Mm-hmm. So I decided late in my pregnancy, based out of fear, that I was going to have a home birth. And it wasn't nothing that I planned for. It was just based out of necessity, because I knew that if something would go wrong, I would be okay with that, because that was the decision that I made from my heart, not a decision that somebody else made. And I wasn't going to allow somebody to have that much control over something that should be so natural for my body. My goodness. So I decided to do it at home. And I was like, and I didn't know what a doula was. Well, I would have just went and got a doula to come along with me to my prenatals so that they can advocate for me and provide me with that information. After I delivered my fourth baby, which was a beautiful experience, me and my daughters were home. My fiance was home. I delivered on a couch. It was beautiful. Wow. But it was based out of fear. You know, I'm in Duquesne. McKeesport does not have a maternity unit. So if something went wrong, I was asked out pretty much. Yeah, buddy. Pretty much. But I wasn't going to allow some white male doctor to tell me he had to cut me open because he said so. That just didn't sit right with me. That's so I was like, I mean, that happens every day. I mean, I was told you're a certain age, you're high risk. And when I went in, he wasn't interested to talk to me because I wasn't having a high risk pregnancy. He was like, I'm a high risk doctor. You're boring. So there were the engagement and the conversation that I had with him were 2 seconds. He was like, nothing's wrong. Oh, okay, bye. You know, and there was just no kind of that kind of thing that Cali is going to be looking for, which is somebody who's walking along, you know, with her during this thing. And it's, you know, hopefully, Cali, you get connected. Yes, with Birthing Hut or with Healthy Start, and have our opportunity to have somebody walk you through, because you had a lot of questions when we talked yesterday. Miracle. Definitely hit me up, Cali, so I can assist you with those questions and we can walk you through the process and also get you signed up with Healthy Start. To me as soon as I get a chance.
But I will say, to India's point, it's very necessary to make sure you advocate for yourself. Some people don't understand or don't know that when you're in the hospital, there is a social worker and there is a patient advocate who you can call to advocate on your behalf if you can't get a loved one or a family member there. And I've never been pregnant, but a few years ago, I was sick. I went to the hospital and I was just in so much pain. I couldn't move. And the doctor came in and she said, oh, you just have a stomach virus. I had to come back. I was having an ovary torsion, and I actually ended up having to have surgery and have an ovary removed. And the guy was like, I don't know why she told you that. Like this, if she would have just done a basic procedure, they would have realized that you had a growth bigger than a grapefruit and you needed help immediately, right? And so when we're talking about why people have a trepidation, especially Black people, and I was at a well-known, high-ranked, top hospital in the country, and that still happened, right? And so people need to know that there are advocates there for you. There are numbers that you can call where people will like show up on your behalf and fight for you and ask the questions for you. But it's also very important outside of talking to your doctor that your family and friends know what your birthing plan or what your medical plan is going to be. If you say you're going to have a natural birth, let them know, right? Let your friends know, because also your people are going to call and show up. And if they don't know what your plan is, they may agree to do something that you don't want to happen just because, you know, you're sick, you're stressed, you're incapacitated. So it's also very important that you let other people in your circle know what your plan is going to be, and just in case something happens.
And you got to have a strong voice. When I delivered my now teenager, and I kept saying, "Where's my husband? We're about to have this surgery, and nobody's listening to me." And they ready to do the first cut, and I'm like, "Yo, stop!" And somebody said, "Did she say she had a husband?" It was like this whole kind of surprise. Black woman's on the table, and this judgment, and we had a plan about how this was going to go down, but they decided who I was as soon as I got rolled in there. And you know, the fact that you would not consider my partner, whoever that was, as a part of this was stunning to me. And then to verbally speak out loud your kind of what? You know, like I was slowing down the whole train to attend to my needs. And
slowing down your train.
Slowing the train, right. I was just like a body on the thing. They had work to do. They were training a new OBGYN, and you know, it was like I could hear them talking during the training. And I heard her, he said, "Up, you cut an artery. I see blood flying." And so, and I'm listening to this. So here's what we do when this happens. In the meantime, there is blood flying everywhere. And I was just this thing on the table, and they weren't talking to us about what was happening. That's when having that advocate, that's when having somebody that says, "Yo, there's a human being attached to this. This is why I wished I'd had, you know, a doula or you know, had done something with a midwife." And we just weren't talking about it as much 18 years ago, you know, when I had my last one. So Cali, on the upside, you got options. And I know, you know, when we talked a couple of days ago, it was feeling like you didn't, but you know, it's wonderful that, you know, Iyanna and India are on here and talking about what that could really look like for you, which is hopefully giving you some comfort.
And see, my Nana, I love her to death. She had 3 girls, and my mom, she has 9 grandkids, and my Nana has been at every single birth of every one of her grandchildren. So for me to see her do that and to be like, well, where's my mom at? Like, why can't my mom be? My Nana made sure that if the doctor says something was funny, no, wait, hold up. Wait a second. That's my baby. You make sure she's right. We don't do it at all. And I'll take her home. Like, and her grandma's from the South. So my great grandmother gave birth. That's when I say I'll give birth at home. My great grandmothers did. In Louisiana, gave her birth at home. So I'm like, if my grandma can do it back in the 50s,
yes,
20, I could do it.
Yeah. And that goes back to what Dr. Jamil Bay was saying. Like, doulas are nothing new. We had the granny midwives. Black folk gave birth at home with midwives, with their auntie in the room, with grandma in the room, because we are the original gatekeepers for birth when it comes to Black women. So, I mean, going in a hospital, laying on your back as if you have some sort of disease or some type of emergency has not been something that is familiar of us. That's not something that we have started. But once they started to put regulations on exactly what is constituting a midwife, once they started giving them literacy tests, knowing daggone well they expected us to fail it, and have a nurse resident come and tell a granny midwife who's been delivering over hundreds of babies and not lose any on her plate, tell her what she needs to do and how to be sanitary and all of this extra stuff, then that's where you bring the disassociation and the miscommunication from the Black community to the hospitals in these institutions. They're doing the same thing now when it comes to doulas. Now everybody has to be certified through one organization, and Black organizations that are providing certifications aren't deemed as important, or it's everything is done systematically, and it's a horror because we're talking about lives here. Maternal mortality is at stake.
I was getting paid to do it. I mean, I think about my grandmother died probably 5 years ago at 109 years old. And one of the jobs she had for the government was to get in her little car that they wound up basically and go out in the country in Mississippi. And she was doing some of the work that you're doing. She talked about cleanliness. She talked about deliveries. She talked, woman to woman. Her job was to go from farm to farm out there in rural Mississippi and talk to women about, the delivery of their babies. And so all of a sudden, like you said, it's gotten very sanitized, and somebody's got to be at the end of getting paid on this in the big systems. And so they have cut out what is normally, a natural kind of thing. I mean, I don't know what I would have done without my sister standing there when that last one went down. And
experience to something that's like, hurry up, get done, and go on about your business so we can get you out.
Yeah. So now, a couple days ago, you said you weren't sure where you would give birth, Cali. Are you any clearer about maybe what you're going to do this time?
I'm leaning more towards God willing, everything's healthy. I'm healthy, baby's healthy, hungry but healthy. But I'm gonna do a birthing center. If I can do it at home, we're gonna do it at home. And that's God willing, everything happens perfectly or on a healthy standpoint, which I know it will.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm just gonna enjoy this eating process because that's how we do right here.
Dr. Bay, you think this topic's going to come up? I mean, I know this is not one we focused on. We've been doing COVID-related stuff since April. We haven't focused on this before. Is that going to come up at your Black COVID meeting?
Probably not. I think, the conversations that we're having with the COVID stuff, are more about, making sure that folks have accurate information and this stuff. This is a special condition. And like India said, there's not a whole lot of research. There's not a whole lot of advice other than, just the normal, protect yourself, be smart, do your research and do what you have to do. This is the virus is violent. It's a threat that's real. And we have to respect that. Not just in Pittsburgh in particular, Allegheny County, birthing, if you're while Black, is another significant threat.
Yeah,
that we need to figure out, okay, what's that look like? But I think, here in this forum and going forward, we probably do need to think, let's dissect it. What are all of these pieces that we can start to talk about, infant mortality, infant health, maternal health, not just, this aspect of it, but what's a series of conversations so that we can understand how we can have better outcomes. And say, we obviously have to take responsibility for itself. I've never been a part of any of these conversations with, family, friends, where women are talking about, all of the positive things that they felt in the hospital around their pregnancy. It's usually horror stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
we are lowest in 97% of cities in terms of, positive pregnancy experiences. We're at the bottom of the bottom.
Right.
The importance, Cali and Iyanna and India, and talking about this is you are the real basis for these statistics. I got stats over here for days. I do all my homework for shows, and this stuff is on paper. I'm a DEI professional. I talk about this, but you guys are actually on the ground. You are carrying babies. You're helping to coach the delivery of babies. You are working with COVID and now training as a doula, India. And so, these are real voices about, that bring these statistics to life. And these are real people having babies and who want to have amazing, experiences that are threatened because of where we live. Miracle, some of those stats we were looking at yesterday by neighborhood were crazy. Dr. Bay, you may have provided those, but, we were looking at Lincoln, Leamington and other areas. The infant mortality rates were nuts.
6 times, 9 times the national rate. And I think I also understand we're having what they call the quarantine pregnancy boom, right? So a lot of people are going to be pregnant or coming up pregnant these these past 6 months, but even so, these next 6 months, because people are now going to be out and about, the vaccine's here. So I've talked to people who are like Tinder swiping like there's no tomorrow, just because they haven't had that interaction because of the shutdown. So y'all guys be thinking about, there's going to be a lot of babies coming. And if we're not, and we haven't even talked about trans parents, queer parents, disabled parents, really, and if we're not studying what's happening, there's no information. So people are literally going to have to go in, have traumatic experiences, share them, and then people are going to be like, oh, right? I remember UPMC was like, okay, we're going to allow you to have a doula, but is it like a doula per person, or is it the doula for the whole floor? And what happens, if that doula has to leave, or if that midwife has to leave, right? Who then is what medical provider is stepping in? And it's bad. And there are a lot of organizations, since that City Lab report, have been really trying to change and make policies for the better. But we just saw with the city council vote and the budget that the will and the innovation for the decision makers just isn't there on this issue, right? Yeah. And so it's going to be up to the birthing hut, people like India deciding to become doulas to change the situation. Also specifically Black women are frontline workers, are essential workers. They have to go to work, right? You opened up the state. And so the landlord's saying, hey, the state's open, I need my rent check, right? The business is like, hey, the state's open, you have to come to work. And if you don't come to work, I'm gonna report you and you can't get unemployment. So we created this system that forces people to go to work, that forces people to possibly have COVID exposure. But now we're not giving the patients the resources and information, and we're also not engaging the medical providers to have better culturally competent practices.
Right.
And so now Black women are dying.
Mm-hmm. I spray people now.
What'd you say, Cali?
Spray people now.
Wow.
I think it's
and Miracle, to your point, you say Black babies are dying too. And so I just looked at those numbers again. We were looking at yesterday, Cheryl. Mm-hmm. So nationwide, for every 1,000 births, there are 6 deaths. Uh-huh. In some Pittsburgh neighborhoods that are predominantly Black, those numbers are 25, 26, 24, 20 deaths. And so when you look at it, there's no inherent vulnerability for Blackness that says that babies should die. Uh-huh. These are the policies, these are the political determinants of health. These are policy decisions that the governor is making, that the state legislature, that the federal administration. These are decisions that Mayor Peduto has made. These are political decisions that lead to these outcomes. Where are you working? What are the working conditions? What are the wages? How are you getting around? What toxins are in the air? All of these are political decisions that have an impact. Children are dying at those kind of rates because you live near the Liberty Tunnel, and that stack is putting poison, 70,000 cars a day, putting poison, concentrating it into a neighborhood, and kids playing near that. That's a political decision that leads to deaths. That's not like, oh, Black kids are more vulnerable just because they're Black.
Uh-huh. Right. So we are coming to a close on this, and I want to do a quick round. India, I mean, anything you want to leave in terms of things we need to either leave in the chat or any advice that you want to leave before we wrap?
I was just gonna say that it's important to also note that Black women have been doing this work in Pittsburgh for a very long time. Before the report came out last year, and we talked about this when the report came out, but this was something that Black women we've been talking about this for years, decades. Absolutely. And so I think as we're having this conversation, it is a heavy topic to have, but also know that there are women who have been working around the clock, who have dedicated their careers and their lives around impacting this issue. I've been working in this work since 2016 when I was working with New Voices. There's so many things, political advocates, there are doulas, there are the nurses who start out as nurses and then they're like, oh, I need to be in labor and delivery because I want to be a Black nurse and be there for that mother. So there's a lot of women who have been doing a lot of the groundwork for decades in Pittsburgh. And I just want to leave on that note of hope, because there's so many women in my circle, so many women in Iyanna's circle. There's so many women who we come in contact with every single day who are the heroes at the end of the day. And I just wanted to put that out there, and to all of them watching, because I'm sure they're tuning in. I love all of y'all, and I appreciate everything that y'all do. I wouldn't be here talking about this subject if it wasn't for these women. And
they're listening to you, India, too, and they're listening to Iyanna, and they're 16 years old, and they're thinking about, what am I going to do? And one of the things that Devin mentioned is introducing these professions to high schoolers, early on. This is a profession.
And I was working with Devin on building that project. Center is getting these high schoolers in there so they can see what midwifery is. So it's a lot going on the ground that we don't talk about and we don't get a chance to talk about. But I just want it to be known that it's work being done. The only other thing is check out PCHS website. We're doing a lot of work. We're partnering with Healthy Start in the near future. I think a lot of times we talk about these conversations, and a lot of the times we leave out preventative health. And so one of the things that we're working on at PCHS, even through the COVID program, is community health workers being employed, helping out in these communities, getting on the ground and telling people how to really take care of those preventative health measures, getting those checkups done. So definitely visit PCHS. That's pchspit.org.
We'll make sure that is in the link. We are we're getting behind, but Iyanna, first of all, I want to say thanks to all you guys. This conversation was amazing. Cali, thanks for being so vulnerable and coming on and talking about what you're going through. I know that was not necessarily an easy thing, but it was so important. So we really appreciate you doing that. It was great. Iyanna, I'm going to leave the last word to you. Before we close out, any advice that you want to leave our viewers before we wrap?
Yes, I definitely just want to make sure that birthing persons understand to make sure that your expectations of your birth and your birth plan align with reality. Do not have a birth plan that is so far left that is impossible to reach, and then you put yourself and your child at risk for whatever may happen. Make sure that you communicate your desires and your wishes, and you have backup plans.
All right. Fantastic final word. We appreciate it. Miracle, we're going to still work on that dating show because you was saying earlier about, I ain't at risk for having
I'm not trying to have, a quarantine pregnancy right now. My mom has been asking for grandkids because I've been quarantining with her this whole entire time. She's asking for them. I'm not, but we'll have the dating show.
We're going to have a dating show, y'all. Dating a Black in Pittsburgh.
During a global pandemic.
It's not next week, however. Next week, we're going to have, another pretty serious conversation, and this one about mortality and that family and how they're doing. And so we ask you to come back next week, Tuesday at 2:00 for What Black Pittsburgh Needs to Know, as we try to bring you really important things that are happening to Black folks in our community. Until then, we are out, and we appreciate you tuning in. Take care.
Yes.
Peace.
Thank you.